Welcome to Swing State. As we get closer to the election, we are bringing back candidates from some of the most consequential races to see how things may have changed and get in the questions that are now most pertinent. And tonight, we welcome back Shelane Etchison, the independent candidate for North Carolina's 9th Congressional District, which covers parts of Guilford and Chatham counties and all of Alamance, Randolph, and Moore counties. Welcome back. You've been out there campaigning, for about 3 months since we last talked to you.
That's right.
Voters are finally beginning to pay attention. What are you hearing from them as you hit the campaign trail?
Wow, well, a lot has happened in our political space since we've been here, right?
It's on the list.
Absolutely, definitely at the top of the ticket. So, actually, I have not heard much of a divergence from voters since before I was on here a couple months ago. The facts still remain. People want to know that their leaders are going to be working for them. They want to feel and see a functional Congress, and especially Congress is going to tackle issues like inflation, affordability, and actually start getting some legislative work done. So that's kind of remains the same.
Yeah, and I was going to ask what the number one thing you're hearing folks say and the big issue. So let's hit that right away. So when people say, you got to bring down my grocery bill, I can't afford a house, what are you saying Congresswoman Shelane Etchison would do in that? Yeah,
I said, well, I'm right there with you. I mean, it is incredibly difficult for people right now, whether you, like you said, groceries, housing, childcare. And so there are tools that if we have, again, a cooperative Congress that can help these issues, right?
And what would you push, though? I mean, tell me some of the ideas you might put in a bill.
Well, think about it like just basic economics and supply and demand. Let's take housing, for example.
Yeah.
We have had for a decade now a shortage of housing. And so how are we helping incentivize builders to get that more building and construction done that's going to be appealing to more low-income folks or first-time homeowners, okay? Right. Builders are incentivized to build bigger, larger. So how can government, say tax credits, incentivize more building to go on and help ease that supply burden?
Answer your own question there. How do you do that? I mean, is it you give them tax breaks of some sort, or because the natural government instinct is throw more money at it?
Yeah, exactly, and that's the whole thing, because then, trust me, I'm always like, $35 trillion in debt, that is a reality. But then you also have, how are we still taking care of people? So I don't think everything has to be a zero-sum game. I would support considering tax credits or some sort of stimulus for builders to get up that housing supply.
Particularly at the beginner house buying stage.
Yes, that's where we see it. Okay, most folks in your generation have a home, have enjoyed affordable houses, and have built their wealth from that. But it's the younger generation that feel like they are in purgatory to be renters for their entire life. How demoralizing is that? And then they're delaying starting their families because of it too. So absolutely, I have a keen eye on how to help those younger families purchase a home.
Let me make a note here. The guest just called the host old. Okay, got it down.
No, with most reverence. But
no, I get it. And I have owned a house for a while. You're right. All right, and the biggest change you mentioned, since there's a different presidential candidate since we last spoke. At the time we first spoke, you said you didn't like either candidate, and that was President Biden and former President Trump. You felt something of an endorsement for independent candidates like yours, the fact that people didn't like them either. What do you make of Vice President Harris and her campaign?
Well, no doubt that she's really kind of brought a new energy, and I think the bar, frankly, is very low. 70% of Americans did not want this matchup of Trump-Biden. Just by surely having a new person in there, it's really kind of changed the energy and dynamic. I do take issue that there wasn't a more full-fleshed out kind of a nomination process for her, okay? Because again, I am an independent, Bob. I just want to make that very clear. I'm running as an independent, and I would love to have more choices at the top of the ticket and even all throughout down the ballot. But I think it's been good for our country that Democrats decided to, Biden stepped down, and now we have her, and so more people seem to be energized and interested in the race than before.
There was a bit of a kerfuffle over some of the things surrounding the Democrats' vice presidential nominee, Tim Walz, and I want to ask you, as a veteran, what you make of his claims of having been a combat sergeant major, claimed to have retired as a command sergeant major, as a rank that he never fully reached.
Yeah, I think this veteran on veteran attacks that we're seeing right now is really unfortunate. He served 24 years in the Army National Guard. I give him credit for that. Most people never choose to put on the uniform, so I give him that credit. He said he misspoke about carrying a weapon in war. He ought to be accountable for misspeaking, and I think he has said that as much. But then, it's kind of interesting in the military. Sometimes people end up filling roles that are a rank higher than what they technically are. I feel like I saw something from the National Guard saying, oh, he's fine to say this, but no, he had to clear the record. If he retired as a master sergeant, then that's what he retired as. Yeah. But I think it's just like clear it, but for the most part, that shouldn't really be detrimental to the fact that he served 24 years.
Right, he did do the 24 years. You're right. Have you been able to raise money? You mentioned being an independent. The parties have value and that they can do those kind of things for you. How has the fundraising gone? Yeah,
well, I'm the first person to ever be a congressional independent or candidate for Congress in North Carolina as an independent. Yeah. Okay, we are breaking brand new ground, and I don't think people realize all of these little hurdles that exist, whether it's having the right software or voter files. I mean, the system is designed to not have anyone really be competition to the two main parties. So fundraising is a part of that as well. There's hurdles there, but I'm actually really proud of what we've been able to do. We've raised, we're getting close to the $350,000, which is, if you look at that's more than some other congressional candidates in our states that have raised, and they are running with the parties, okay? So I'm really proud of what we've done, and I think all of the donors are donating because they believe in me, they believe in this, and want to see fresh choices.
You said that you didn't join or remain in the Republican Party because of things you heard them say about some of our LGBTQ citizens, and you were disturbed by the Dobbs Supreme Court decision that overturned Roe, sent the question back to the states. Then why not be a Dem? Why not be a Democrat? I mean, was there something specific on why you couldn't join either party?
I think there's merits and value to some of the tenets and principles that both the parties bring. Republicans like to say that they're for more smaller government, some fiscal restraint. Have they been doing that in practice? We can maybe say not. But I do believe in that. I do believe in a smaller, more limited, restrained government ought to be at the forefront of our thinking when we think about policies, not just, throw money at this, do this, regulate that. I always like to think about, is this necessary first? And I think that's not necessarily maybe a Democrat.
Certainly true that both parties spend money in a big way. A lot more to come tonight, including tapping into Shalane's extensive military background to talk about U.S. policy in an increasingly dangerous world. Welcome back to Swing State. Tonight we're talking with the independent candidate in a three-way race for North Carolina's 9th Congressional District, which covers most of the eastern and southern sections of our viewing area. Shelane Etchison is with us. And Shelane, it's not fun to talk about, but the world appears to be a very dangerous place. What do you see when you look at the situation? And again, Shelane was a Special Forces soldier, correct?
That's right. I was in Special Operations. Yeah,
Special Operations, and you were in more than a decade. So this is not just coming out of the clear blue sky. You have real experience here. When you look at what's going on in Gaza and the way Israel had to defend itself, and now against the Iranian proxies on its northern border with Hezbollah and the Houthi rebels as well, what do you see? What do you tell people about this?
This is one of the most complicated geopolitical situations, and that's not new news. We're just in a period right now where it's obviously heightened tensions, but it's very precarious because you're talking about dealing with proxies in Iran and nuclear powers, and so I think that it's something that, again, we really need to make sure that we have the right people in positions that have that delicate balance and understanding of when military power and hard power is warranted, but that balance of diplomatic and soft power and negotiations for a peaceful way forward. So it's really tricky. Things change on a dime, and so there's unfortunately just no real easy answer with it. But we need to have pragmatic people with a flexible mindset on how to approach the problem as it adapts.
People talk about, well, we need to use diplomacy, and I would argue diplomacy is worthless unless there is force to back it up. You cannot tell adversary X or adversary Y, we think you need to do this, if there's going to be no consequence if you don't.
Speak softly and carry a big stick. You're right.
Or even speak loudly if you have to, but the big stick has got to be there, and I don't know that I see that in some of our actions lately.
Like in what regard?
Well, Iran is behind all this in the Middle East. We're going to get into a little more of that in just a second. But what are we doing to corral? I mean, we allowed them to sell oil on the market again, so they've got billions of dollars they wouldn't have otherwise had. I mean, do we need to, and I know you're not Secretary of State, but I'm wondering if your military background tells you until we strike Iran, they're not going to ever back down.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if you give an inch, you'll take a mile. So I'm not a proponent of any sort of isolationism per se. I do think that our military footprint and presence is warranted and needed. And so we do have certain strategic bases in that region of the world that need to be manned. And if we're not there, that's just going to be creating a vacuum. And now Iran has full freedom to rule that region and sow havoc and influence and their terrorism aspirations as well. So if we take our foot off that gas pedal to the right, we don't know what that will be, but it's that delicate balance again, because we don't want to incite some larger war that's going to be protracted and, God forbid, involve nuclear weapons.
And there are reports now that Iran is a key financial supporter of the pro-Palestinian demonstrators in this country. Now, I have said from the beginning, since October 7th and the reaction we saw afterward, I cannot prove this, but my initial instinct was, this isn't organic. This has been planned out by Iran and their allies from before October 7th. It was, we're going to attack on October 7th, and then we're going to start pushing all this unrest in the U.S.
Sure, and you have information warfare being done to us on a daily basis through social media and phones, and you've got propaganda being pushed out by our adversaries in China, and they're just loving it. The internal unrest that is being created with this. I mean, is there warrants on the Palestinian side that about the plight? Of course there is, right? But I have no doubt that our adversaries are meddling in kind of unconventional ways to cause the havoc that we've been seeing.
I don't see anyone, though, calling out the Palestinians for using innocent women and children as shields. They will put them out there to be killed first so they can use that as a political bludgeon. No one calls them out.
That's a tried and true terrorist tactic. I mean, we saw it with ISIS, we saw it with Al-Qaeda. Terrorists have no mercy on this. They'll strap bombs to disabled children and put them in a crowd and detonate. And so, if that's not being called out, it should. I mean, it's barbaric, it's horrific, and I think a lot of people don't understand these intricacies of how difficult kind of a surgical counterterrorism warfare really is to be waged. It's messy, it's complicated, it's difficult, again, to have that surgical precision when you are trying to root out terrorist organizations among the general population. Of course you want to prevent civilian casualties. No one wants to see that.
Since we last spoke, Ukrainian forces have pushed into Russia on an offensive. What does your military background say about whether they can truly be successful? And I think successful in a war with Russia is simply getting it to end from Ukraine's point of view. I'm not sure how the best way to be ending this with Ukraine and Russia. I mean, Russia invading Ukraine obviously is abhorrent. We have a duty to make sure that they don't incur any further, again, into NATO territory, because they are coming up on that border. That's going to incite a World War III. Again, it's that delicate balance of making sure that we are not in a position where there's protracted, potentially nuclear warfare. But there does need to be a look at how does this end? Yesterday, I did a post on the 3-year anniversary of the 13 service members that were killed in the withdrawal of Afghanistan, about the lack of civilian oversight. 20 years, what was our withdrawal plan from Afghanistan? What was it? What was our end goal? You need to have that foresight, and the pragmatism is the key word on this. We need to have some pragmatism with Ukraine too. Only a couple minutes in this segment, but I want to get on something that I think is very important. Tell me very quickly your father's role in your life.
Oh, my dad?
Yeah.
He's lovely. He's wonderful. His name's Don, and he's my biggest supporter. Always has been.
Big part of your success?
Oh, yeah, of course. He's great.
Let's take a look at some numbers that we put together that I want you to sort of comment on. Couples that are married, the family's less than 11% poverty rate. When it's just the mom trying to hold on by herself, it's nearly 50. 71% of high school dropouts are from fatherless homes. That's 9 times the national average. Kids with involved fathers, 43% more likely to earn A's in school, twice as likely to enter college, 75% less likely to have a teenage birth, 80% less likely to spend time in jail, 5 times more likely to commit suicide if the dads aren't there. If there were a government program that showed that kind of numbers, it would have unanimous support and would be fully funded. No one talks about the role of fathers and demand that fathers do their job. Because the truth is, women almost never, not never, but almost never abandon their children. Men do it all the time. Why are people not talking about this?
Well, I I think people are talking about this a little bit more, that there needs to be, the central unit of our country is the family unit.
Right.
And some families look different, okay, and that's totally fine with that, where you have loving parents that are going to be nurturing and caring with children to get these stats that you're talking about right here. And there is a slowdown of marriages happening, and what's interesting is people like to say, well, feminism. Oh my goodness, I take real contention with that, because when you actually look at women who are single mothers, they don't want to be single moms.
Right.
They don't want to, they want a partner in their life.
And we're going to continue this after this break. We do have to take this break with a few more minutes with Shelane, though, tonight, including her views on women in combat. That's next. We're back with congressional candidate Shelane Etchison, the independent for the 9th District here in North Carolina. Before we went to break, we were talking about the importance and role of two parents, and particularly fathers who way too often, in my view, abandon their kids and their families and their responsibilities. And we weren't quite done with that subject. And you feel like there is some talk trying to make this happen?
I don't think this is what society wants. I do think people...
You mean the lack of the father is just not what they want?
No, I don't think society wants to be, just raising children on their own, or, estranged from their children. So, I think this is a really interesting social dynamic, but how are we making it so that parents and people come together and look at themselves as a partner unit, okay? I do think there's been some interesting stuff on marriage actually puts more workload on women than if they didn't. And so I think more and more women are being judicious in who they select as a partner to make sure that it's enhancing part of their life and raising children rather than potentially another burden. And
that's fine. I mean, I think it's much better to encourage than to wag the angry finger in general. But look what we've done with things like drunk driving. Your generation doesn't do it nearly as much as my generation did. That's a great thing. We've sort of found a way to get smoking, although we now have other issues with vaping and all this stuff, but generally smoking's way down. We did it through social constructs, and I'm wondering, how can we do this with parents to encourage fathers to be there? It's as your dad, I'm sure, would say, as I can say, it's a wonderful thing to be a dad.
It is, and I think a lot of people, you need to have role models. If you can see it, and if it's emulated, and you have those structures, whether it's in school or programs or clubs or mentors, I think that would be really helpful. And how are you supporting people? Because there's a lot of folks that, I guess being a young parent is scary. And so, this is something that obviously the outcomes are very clear on the benefit of what that does for our children, their health, their education, and also a good thing for our families and for our country. So certainly a public policy issue that needs more attention and tackling.
And needs general societal influence. Doesn't have to be government, but just a little tidbit on being a parent. I will tell you, the kids sometimes listen to what you say. They always watch what you do. And that goes to what you were saying there. All right, let's talk a little bit about your career. So you went into combat. When you first joined the military, were you allowed to be near a front line? And then technically, women are still not allowed in direct combat, are they?
No, they are. They are. Okay. So all jobs as of 2016 are opened up to women should they qualify and meet the standards, stuff like that.
You were not thrilled about the idea that you were not allowed in combat when you first joined?
Yeah, so I joined in 2008, and the Women in Combat ban was very much still in place. So for the Army, that was about a third of the jobs were automatically barred from me, regardless of whether I was able to meet the qualifications.
And did they, this question comes up all the time, did they change some of the standards to get women in?
Yeah, people like to think that, and so
it's called gender norming for people who haven't heard of it. So if a man can do X with his physical capabilities, they only asked women to do Y. Was the idea?
Well, that's how it used to be. There were different standards, but for combat jobs, I mean, there is a single standard that if you need to do this job, you need to be able to perform at, regardless of no matter what you are. Okay, and mind you, there's plenty of men that can't meet these standards themselves. Granted, very few women can, but I've always been of the opinion that there's a woman that wants to serve her country and serve in that capacity, and has the ability to do that. Who are we to tell her no? Who are we to tell someone not to serve their country?
The argument was always that it would change the dynamic. The man wouldn't do his job necessarily because he's worried about protecting the woman next to him. That's the argument.
Yeah, that's the argument. And, sure, I could say there's some merits to that, but I will say, even before, well before women were allowed into combat jobs, those men were getting in trouble doing something else. This isn't some discipline's out the window now, okay? So let's not pin this on opening it up to women.
What about this idea that I remember Colin Powell went after a reporter when he was here years ago, who asked about, fairness in the Army, and he cut her off and said, no, this is not about, the Army has nothing to do with fairness, the military. It's about, to be honest, killing people and breaking things in defense of this nation and its goals. Do you still hold that it's not about fairness? People say, it's not fair that this happens in the Army or doesn't happen.
No,
it's not about fairness, though, is it? It's not like civilian society, is my point.
No, I think it's a very serious job, okay? And you need to make sure that we are at our absolute readiness to meet the job at hand. It's not, bending the rules or capitulating here or there, I guess, for the sake of fairness. But again, if you're talking about should women be allowed or not, I think that's just the principle of what it means of one of the tenets of our country, okay? If you're able to meet standards and you want to do this job and serve your country, then the shot should be there.
Okay, you wouldn't mind seeing new rules for what it takes to get a candidate on the ballot?
You mean regarding petition signatures?
Right.
Yeah, well, as again, the only person who's ever successfully gotten all the petition signatures to get on the ballot is an independent or unaffiliated. I learned a lot, and I think that you need to have our politicians have some skin in the game. It is so easy right now for people who are in their seat. They have the incumbency advantage, they have the money, they're a reliable vote for their party, and all the system makes it so that they can stay there for the long term. Some people are even dying on the job, they're staying that long. I think it would be good, and some states do require this, that candidates, in order to get on the ballot, has some sort of petition requirement or some sort of buy-in from their constituencies first.
So the parties can't instantly be on the ballot just by being the parties? That type of thing?
Or I think if you want to run as a candidate, and file, then there should be some petition requirement.
Just a couple seconds left before we close out here. How do people want to get a hold of you, want to go to one of your events? Where do they find it all on your website?
Yeah, website. We post different events that are coming up, and that's probably the best way. And we've got phone numbers on there. We're available to you.
Shelane Etchison for Congress. What should they search?
Etchison for Congress.
Etchison for, and it's
ETCHISON. But here's what, Shelane is unique enough. You just put Shelane in Google, it'll come up.
Very good. Well, thank you for watching tonight. Remember, we're not only on Fox 8, we're also a podcast that you can consume in your car, on your phone, anywhere you want. Just search Swing State wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time.